Hello, and welcome to the Freight Flow Advisor Brief. Today, we're digging into a story that on the surface looks like a C.H. Robinson policy change, but underneath, it's a map of where broker liability, carrier access, and pricing are going next. Now, we're just a few short weeks removed from the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that freight brokers can be sued under state negligent hiring laws. C.H. Robinson started moving carriers within its network to non certified status based on safety thresholds pulled from FMCSA and BASIC. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Supreme Court ruling, here's a quick recap.
Court ruled unanimously to allow a man who lost part of his leg in a trucking crash to sue a major logistics company that hired that truck. The man's attorneys argued that the truck driver had been cited for careless driving in another crash months earlier, and that the broker, C.H. Robinson, should share liability.
So you can still run freight if you're already on load with C.H. Robinson, but your ability to book in the future, especially through their digital tools, just got a lot more restrictive, especially as they start to look at things on the safety side. You see, this is one of those moments where the legal world and the freight world are crashing into each other. No pun intended. And if you're a broker, a carrier, or a shipper, you cannot treat this as C.H. Robinson drama. You see, this is a preview of how operating rules for everyone is going to go in the future. So let's talk about the facts of the case. The Supreme Court decides the Montgomery v. Caribe Transport 2, saying that state law negligent hiring claims against brokers are not preempted by the old federal shield. And listen, this was unanimous. So the translation here is if you pick an unsafe carrier and something goes horribly wrong, you can be dragged into court and you will be questioned and asked to defend how you chose that carrier. Now, on the same day of the ruling, C.H. Robinson did issue a public statement. They said that they'll continue working only with FMCSA licensed carriers, that they support stronger federal safety standards. And further, they stand behind their vetting practices and processes. But as you look a little bit deeper, the operational shoes started to drop. Carriers in their network started to receive a notice. It was titled Changes to Carrier Eligibility. And the language is very specific. It says, you exceed intervention thresholds in C.H. Robinson's scoring model based on FMCSA data. So you're being moved to a non-certified carrier until your basic score improves. Now, for those of you that don't know what a basic score is, it stands for Behavior Analysis and Safety Improvement Categories. And it's essentially a safety ranking used by the government to track how safely a motor carrier operates on the road. It uses a percentile system where 0 is the best and 100 is the worst. For example, if you have a 70, you have more violations than 70% of similar carriers. Now, there are 7 basic categories, and the government groups that safety data into these areas: unsafe driving, crash indicator, hours of service compliance, vehicle maintenance, controlled substances and alcohol, hazardous materials compliance, and driver fitness. So as we began to research C.H. Robinson a little bit more, we learned that they were also raising the minimum auto liability from $750,000 to $1 million, cutting off carriers with conditional safety ratings, imposing a 7-day cooling off period on brand new authorities, flagging and removing high-risk carriers according to their internal metrics. So put simply, what used to be, yeah, we check your authority and some basics, is turning into, we have a documented safety model, and if you slip above the threshold, you're out. C.H. Robinson is no longer just focused on compliance. They are risk engineering. Now, I want to talk about the uncomfortable truth for brokers. And I'm going to be blunt here, especially with small to mid-sized brokers. For years, the industry has operated under a kind of informal understanding. That era is over. The court has effectively said, we will look at what you knew, what you could have known, and how you made the decision to tender freight to that carrier. The days of plausible deniability are over. And that really changes the game in 3 ways. First, you're now selling your process, not just your capacity. Second, the cost of being sloppy just went up. Before, a negligent selection suit might get kicked early on preemption grounds. Now it's more likely to survive long enough to get really expensive. That means more discovery, more pressure to settle, and higher insurance premium. Third, and last, scale just got a hidden advantage. The ruling rewards the brokers who already invested in compliance teams. Now, I want to be clear, I don't like what that means for competition, but let's be honest. A 5-person shop with a shared inbox and a spreadsheet is not going to impress a plaintiff's lawyer or your underwriter for that matter, especially when they ask for you to show them how you decided a carrier was safe enough. You have to have a real process here. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you're a small or mid-sized broker, you either have to professionalize your vetting or you accept that you're running at a higher risk multiple than your bigger competitors. Now, listen, that was heavy. So we're going to take a quick break and talk about Freight FA. This episode is brought to you by Freight Flow Advisor and freightfa.com. Because if you're listening to this and thinking we don't have a clear way to see how safety, cost, and capacity interact on a lane, that's exactly who Freight Flow Advisor was built for. Freight Flow Advisor is a chat native freight intelligence layer on top of a network built with comprehensive data and inputs. You can literally ask it questions like, what happens to my cost per mile on Dallas to Chicago if I restrict to carriers with clean basic scores and 1 million in liability? You can also jump over to our FMCSA carrier lookup, where you can drop in your carrier lane and see real-time risk associated. But we don't stop there. We explain our reasonings why. We also have helpful tools that give you guidance on how to create a strong vetting process. You know, the best part about Freight FA is it's not some massive platform rollout that you have to start with a salesperson on a sales call with. You just pull up freightfa.com and start chatting right away for free. Just plug in a few key lanes or run some ideas, and you immediately see where your network may be fragile, where you're overpaying, and where safety-driven changes might quietly raise your cost base. So listen, if you're serious about turning volatility, legal risk, and safety constraints into better decisions, not just stress, head over to freightfa.com and make sure you check out our Freight Flow Advisor. It's the fastest way to get your team out of reactive mode and into informed, proactive planning. Okay, so now I want to zoom out and talk about what this means for carriers and network design. Because we used to talk about FMCSA safety scores as a regulatory issue. You want to avoid interventions. You want to avoid audits. You want to keep your rating clean. After C.H. Robinson's move, those safety scores are now commercial scores. They decide whether you're certified or non-certified. They decide whether a system will even show you loads. They decide whether your broker is comfortable putting you on a lane that touches a risk-sensitive customer. If you're a small carrier with a couple of bad inspections, or maybe you've had a paperwork issue or a maintenance issue, that may not kill your authority, but it will absolutely kill your access. And for brokers, that dynamic matters because that kind of capacity you can realistically offer is going to change. Now, don't get me wrong, some lanes will be fine because there are plenty of strong, compliant carriers. In other words, they have a deep bench. But those other lanes, like border crossings or in those rural markets where there may be some specialized freight, those will start to feel the squeeze as soon as the filter tightens. So this ruling doesn't just change your legal risk, it changes the shape of your network. It changes who you can realistically use without losing sleep or even getting sued. And that's why high-level freight intelligence, not just spot rate screens, has to sit at the center of how you plan your network from here. So let's end with something practical and a bit opinionated. Let's talk about what smart, small, and mid-sized brokers will actually do next. Well, one, they're going to turn vetting into a repeatable playbook. If your carrier approval process is currently, we trust Bob, Bob knows the carrier, that can no longer survive this environment. Now, you don't need a Fortune 500 compliance department. What you need is a written policy that says, we check authority, safety rating, basic alerts, insurance, and recent serious incidents. It's just a standard place where that check is documented. And you need to have a process for exceptions. When are they allowed and who's going to sign off on them? How often will they be reviewed? The bar is not perfection. The bar is being able to look at a lawyer or a shipper in the eye and say, here's our process, here's how we followed it, and here's what we knew at the time. Two, you're going to have to resegment your carrier base. You can't look at your carriers as a collective pool anymore. You really need to separate them into three buckets. You have your core carriers who clear your safety and insurance thresholds easily in the first bucket. In the second bucket, you have your conditional carriers. You use only on defined exceptions with clear notes and approvals. Your third bucket is the do not use carriers based on objective criteria, safety rating, pattern of incidents, or inability to provide adequate insurance. This is no longer theory. This is what the big players are doing. The fact that C.H. Robinson was able to flip carriers to non certified that quickly tells you they already had a model for labeling in place. And you should too. So listen, if you don't have segmentation, you're driving blind. Third and last, you really need to price lanes with risk in mind. Most brokers still price lanes like it's 2015. They blend a few rate sources, adjust for seasonality, they adjust for local relationships, and then they send the quote. The Montgomery ruling just added another dimension. And that's, what does it cost you to move this lane if you apply your own safety standards consistently? Because here's the problem: you can't tell a plaintiff you have rigorous vetting, then quietly look the other way on certain lanes because they're hard to cover. So either you maintain high standards everywhere and accept that some lanes will cost more, or you maintain two sets of standards, one for risk, one for revenue, which is exactly what will burn you in court. Smart brokers will start baking safety and carrier mix into how they think about margin. And yes, that means sometimes walking away from freight that only works if you pretend risk is free. Four, upgrade how you see your own network. You have to get out of the habit of answering what if and using gut feel alone. Questions like, what if we raise our internal safety bar above the bare minimum? Or what if we cut every conditional carrier out of the network? If those questions make you flinch, that's a signal. You need tools that let you run these scenarios and see the impact. Which lanes break, which customers are safe, where your cost jumps, where you need different partners. Again, that's why we built Freight Flow Advisor and Freight FA. Not because AI is some trendy tool, but because the combination of legal risk, costs, volatility, and safety constraints is now too complex to run on mental math and a yellow pad. So listen, to wrap this up, the C.H. Robinson story is not about one broker being tough on carriers. It's about a Supreme Court decision finally catching up with how freight really works and forcing the industry to write down, codify, and defend decisions we've been making in the dark. If you're a carrier, your safety record is now part of your commercial identity. If you're a broker, your process just became your brand and your defense. And if you're a shipper, your choice of broker is now a risk decision, not just a rate decision. The next couple of years will separate the brokers who treat this as a compliance checkbox from the ones who treat it as a chance to get more disciplined and sharper, and frankly, more valuable to their customers. So that's it. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you share the Freight FA brief with a colleague. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify and Apple. You can read our comprehensive articles on Substack. Just head over there and search the Freight FA brief. And lastly, you can watch us on YouTube. If you're on social media, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at the Freight Flow Advisor. Until next time, this has been your Freight Flow Advisor brief.